This is Jerry Hochek from Natural Awakenings Magazine and PlanetJersey.com, and I'm here today with Jefferson Harman, dream interpreter, TV and radio personality. And I wanted to ask you about this. I saw an ad for a talk that Deepak Chopra was giving in Manhattan titled Staying Centered in Turbulent Times. Mm-hmm. And this is a topic that you and I talk about at great length, yes. On the rare occasions that we do see each other, because mm-hmm. we are both fairly busy. And I wanted to get your take on this for our readers. What's going on out here in the world? I know it seems pretty turbulent, especially if you're watching the news. Mm-hmm. Which, it seems to be a lot of anxiety and concern about who's in office now. And I know for a fact that disruption always precedes change.
Yes, exactly. You have to have the storm before you have the calm. What I tell people is to look at nature, because nature will give you the answer every time. When you have something that isn't going right in your life, if it's even the right word, something that isn't flowing in your life, it's because you are somehow behaving in a way without realizing it, or thinking in a way that moves against how nature flows. Nature is very specific, and it is, things happen in their own time. They happen with a specific clock. They're orderly. They happen consistently. There's not a flower on the planet that is thinking, oh, it's Thursday and I've only grown this high. It's something where, we create these obsessions and these difficulties. We co-create them. There's this thing about you create your own reality. I believe you co-create your own reality, because simultaneous to you creating your own reality is 7 billion other people plus the rest of the planet all making choices, and that's creating what we perceive as reality. And each reality is its own perception, but I'm getting a far field there. So your best guide through all of this is to look at nature. So if we're in a turbulent time, look at when nature is turbulent, which would be during a storm, let's say a hurricane. Okay, so if there's a hurricane, that means that there's wind and rain and whatever, big storm, and everything is whirling around in a spiral, and it's very intense. And in the center of that, everything is perfectly calm. Okay. So both of those things can be happening simultaneously, and that's what's happening right now. The reason for the turbulence, one of the reasons, is there is an astronomical clock that ticks that is associated with the magnetic pull of everything. And that clock is at a very specific time now where there are several changes. It's not just, the hour and the minute hand. You have days, weeks, months, years, in decades, centuries, millennia. Right now, we're in a time where we're in a new century, a new millennia. We're only into the second decade of this particular century. And we're also in the age of Pisces moving into the age of Aquarius, which is not like New Year's Day, like you have New Year's Eve, Pisces, and 12 a.m. and boom,
But what does that mean?
It's now Aquarius.
What does that mean energetically, for people that don't know about astrology?
Okay, so it's not even just astrology; it's astronomy. So we're talking about actual shifts in the universe and in the way that nature, if you will, flows. And so think of it as the hand of the clock moving from 11 to 12 to 1. That's a pretty profound shift when several of these clocks throughout the universe are turning at the same time. So what we're seeing is this upheaval that's associated with a pivot point. We're in this time where the storm itself is hitting. And the reason is because there are a lot of energies that have built up over time that have been left unaddressed. They need to now filter themselves out. Things that are there that are, I'm going to use the word negative, okay? Right. Yeah. Negative, not necessarily even in the sense of something that is evil, but just negative in the sense of we live in a bipolar universe.
Something that's fear-based.
Not even necessarily that, but just, if you think about it, a storm is there because a certain amount of momentum has gathered, okay, and then the storm happens, and then the rain happens, and then what happens? The flowers, they come after the storm. So in other words, the momentum builds up over time. Then the storm happens, and then you move on from it. So we're kind of in the storm now. So the question is, are you in the turbulence, or are you in the eye? Because depending on where you hold yourself will depend on how your life is working. If you are caught up by what's happening around you, by the news, by what you perceive as being difficulty in your life, bills you can't pay, a problem with your house, a problem with relationships, anything that you're perceiving as negative, and you
career,
are
boss,
you're caught up in that drama.
Right,
you're in the storm. Okay, you're in the hurricane aspect of the energy that's going on right now. Whereas if you're in the eye, that's when you can affect positive change. So we see that in things like the Women's March, which was this huge global connected entity, essentially. It's the largest protest that's ever happened on this planet, and yet it was peaceful. No arrests. I mean, the city of Los Angeles, where something like this on another day would have been absolute chaos, 750,000 people, and it was completely,
I read there wasn't even one recorded incident.
Exactly
during the entire day of all this activity.
So understand, while we're witnessing all of this upheaval, simultaneously, we are also witnessing an awakening. The awakening is what's important. Because that's the shift to the more positive energy. That's the point where we get out of the storm and into the spring and the flowers growing.
So the awakening is going to drive the change, because we're waking up to the fact that
the awakening is the change. The turbulence will drive the awakening.
Right, but we're actually waking up to the fact that if we want change, that we have to create it ourselves.
That it comes from within.
This is all an internal game. It
is and it's not, because what's happening is the shift that's happening is we've become too insular.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Too isolated.
We're too isolated. We're too much looking at our cell phones, sitting at our computers, watching our TVs, and during some of what's happening now that's complicated about this time is the very fact that we've been asleep at the wheel for so long. We've been just going about our lives, going to work, doing what we're doing. In the meantime, the planet has been creating this momentum that's leading to this storm, all the while that we've been kind of doing our thing and not necessarily paying attention to it. But what has shifted is that now all these people who have been in that state are suddenly awakened, and they're going to town hall meetings, and they're going to marches, and they're writing letters to their senators and congressmen. And I'm not even just talking politics. I'm talking that shift, which is specific to politics, is also occurring in all facets. So what you're seeing people who have been in individual energy for too long are beginning to expand that to become part of community energy. And I say that because the community energy is where the interaction is happening that is going to create the healing of the time that we're living in right now. So if you go and you volunteer at a soup kitchen and you get one-on-one with somebody who's really having a hard time, and you're helping that person, if you tutor a child, if you join a choir, which is what I did, join a choral ensemble, join a band, do something where you are with group energy creating something that's positive, that's helping to heal the people that are involved in the project and the people that the project itself is assisting. Join a group, start going to take an adult course at a college. Become involved with other people in the conversation, and don't be combative about it. Be collective about it. Create together. That's the energy that's going to pull us out of this. So if we want to change what we perceive as the storm, then what we need to do is remain in the eye, and we'll get to that in a second, so that we can affect the change that will calm the storm. And the reason that you want to remain in the eye is because that's present moment energy, and that's the only place that you can affect any real change.
Right.
If you're caught up in the detail of the time, that's the storm. How are you going to change anything in the world if you're caught up in all of it? If you want to make it better, you need to be centered yourself. That's the eye.
Absolutely. And then...
and that doesn't mean that you're alone in the eye. In the eye, you can do a lot of things, networking, community, with other people who are also in the present moment saying, you know what, things aren't the way we'd like them right now. How do we make that better?
Right, and I think that needs to be the first dialogue.
And I think also you need to put into that the fact that making it better. What does that mean? The goal is always joy.
Right. So
making it better means not having the vitriolic argument that's going to make everybody unhappy at the end and no one's going to learn anything from. You need to have some kind of a way to talk to people that you disagree with, that you can find common ground on which you do agree, and just work with that. Let go of the disagreement long enough to work with the level on which you do agree. and then see what changes.
Right. It sounds great, and I think it's a matter of people just getting out of their routines that they've been in for some of us decades.
Exactly right.
And like you said, engaging in some new activity, in getting out there and connecting with others that have similar ideas and that want to do.
See, I don't even know that I'd say similar ideas. I would say challenge yourself. Go and do something that's not the norm of what you've been doing all this time. If you were volunteering at a soup kitchen, keep doing that. That's great. We need that kind of help. But do something else on top of it. And do something that's completely different, that challenges you personally to have to communicate in a different way than the way you've been communicating.
Interesting. And what's your reasoning for that?
We've gotten too used to modes of communication that are created by our technology. And simultaneously, the very technology that has made us so insular is now also pulling us out of that insular moment into the greater conversation. The very tool that made us so self-focused is now pivoting and turning around and giving us a lens on the world that never existed before. I mean, Facebook wasn't around 10 years ago.
Right.
Twitter, same thing. I mean, these companies now have made it so that countries where people who have been oppressed for decades all of a sudden have a platform on which the rest of the world can say, oh my God, I never knew that was happening. Imagine if Twitter and Facebook were around during World War II. Because the Americans really didn't know what was going on in Germany.
For a while.
For a long time.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
So we didn't enter the war because we did not know what was happening.
Right.
Okay. Imagine if those people had been able to tweet.
Absolutely.
So we are living in a time that's enormously powerful, where people who have not had the power to get their story out are now doing that. And so it's waking us up in a way that we've never been awake or alive before. And the question is, now what do you do with that? And my answer to that, personally, is you get involved. In a way that helps other people. The goal is to help yourself and other people uplift, be kind, be compassionate, do things that actually build on community rather than break it down.
Right, and it could be something as simple as just getting together and having some fun.
Absolutely. We live on a planet now where things that were not possible 10, 20 years ago are commonplace now. And we have an opportunity to create with that. And the question is, what are we going to make of it? Are we just going to argue with each other, or are we going to create something that's going to actually help heal the planet?
Right, and I do believe that for that we have to actually get out of our homes and get together.
We have to get out of our stuck places. That's the thing, is we're
Right.
stuck in routines,
Right.
whatever they may be. And this goes for anybody, whether you're a multimillionaire or you're the poorest person out there. There are still things that you do every day that lock you in place to what you believe, what you have,
And where you've
who
been.
you interact with, where you go.
Right.
And the question is, what are you doing with that? Here's an odd offbeat example. I used to host karaoke for a number of years, and one of the things that I noticed over time was that cell phones, smartphones in particular, started to take hold. That the audience participation changed. Depending on who was sitting in the audience, instead of watching the singer or singing along or participating in the event, were sitting on their cell phones and doing things there. What I'm saying is, either put the phone down altogether, or at least turn it off long enough to engage with what's going on where you are at this specific moment. You have to be getting into the present moment if you want to affect any change. If you are depressed or if you're anxious, you're either in the past or the future. You are not going to affect any change. Worrying has never changed a damn thing. All it does is it makes you...
Or helped anything. I mean,
Yeah, it makes-
doesn't
eats your stomach lining.
It doesn't benefit you in any way.
In any way, shape, or
but yet,
form.
Moms do it constantly.
Well, it's interesting, though, that you use the example of moms, because moms need to pay attention in order to keep their children safe.
Right.
The question is, what's the quality of that attention? If it's just worry, it's not doing anything to help the child. If it's creating a system that helps protect the child, then that's actively doing something. See the difference? So what I'm saying is, if we just create worry,
Right.
we haven't
Worry
really
is
created,
not productive or constructive.
all we've done is we've
yeah.
just created thought that has really had no specific purpose other than to eat up our stomach lining.
To make us feel bad.
To make us feel bad, exactly.
And everyone else around us, because we're making them anxious as well.
And the interesting thing is that the reason that we're worrying is because we're trying to control the situation, which we, number one, do not do, and number two, rather than making ourselves feel better trying to gain control, we make ourselves feel worse. That's what I'm saying. This is an unproductive way about going about healing. If you want to heal something, if you want to make it better, if you want to calm the storm, then the thing to do is to find a specific task. You need a technical blueprint for what it is that you're going to do today, about how that's going to make your life better and how it's going that's going to extend to the people around you. If you just do it for yourself, it isn't enough. You need to extend it to the people around you, including the people that you find the most difficult. That's what's going to affect the change. The storm is not going to calm if all we do is find like-minded people and agree with them, because all the other people who we're railing against are finding their like-minded people. That's what's put us in this bipolar trap to begin with. If we want to heal that, we have to reach across that barrier.
So we have to find some commonality, I think.
And the place to do that is not in the areas in which you disagree. So if you voted for Trump or you voted for Clinton, that's not the issue. The issue is, what do I have in common with you, and how can we work together to make this better?
Absolutely.
So pay attention to nature. Look, who survives the storm? It's the ones who seek shelter. It's the ones who seek to be within the eye, the calm part, who don't stay in the tumult. So if you're caught up in a political discussion, or you're caught up in financial worries or whatever, you're in the storm part of it. And what you want to do is you want to bring yourself out of the storm and into your center, where it's calm, where you can actually create something. That the nature of this time is that people are awakening to their ability to choose one or the other, that they've been complacent about letting the world kind of move them along. Rather, even if they were involved in a career or something that they were in charge of and whatever, they were doing so with some level of a lack of awareness of what was happening around them. And the time itself has now risen up and said, you can't ignore me anymore. And now that that's happening, we have a choice. Okay, if the time is saying you can't ignore me anymore, how do we respond? Do we get caught up in the time and allow it to force our lives to be something we don't want them to be? Or do we create? And how do we create? We can only create in the present moment. So we have to dial ourselves out of the storm and back into our own center. We have to be able to breathe in the present moment and understand that that's the only point that we can create anything. And as we create, what we're doing is we're shifting the energy of the storm to the calm. And we need to do that as a global community. And so the way to do that is to begin to engage community energy at any level. So it's happening in the Women's March. It's happening in town hall meetings. It's happening in people joining, to taking a college course, doing charity work, helping someone out by, volunteering in a soup kitchen or at a school, tutoring children. Join a choir. Do something that involves you in group energy that takes your attention away from your cell phone and puts it on the dynamic of interacting with another human being. And watch how your life changes, because it pulls you into the present moment to have to be dealing with what's in front of you, as opposed to what your mind is tricking you into thinking is the present moment, when you're really distracted by either what's already happened and how you're trying to respond to the new situation to avoid what already happened, or you're so anxious about what might come that, again, you're in the future and you're not in the present. You've pulled yourself out of the moment where you can actually make change. Whereas if you're sitting and you're tutoring a child, you're actively creating a new mind in that moment. If you are, you're answering a question that's being presented to you exactly at that second. If you are singing in a choir, you have to pay attention to what the next notes are that are coming. If you're at a town hall meeting, you are actively involved in the discussion that will change the nature of how things are run in your community. As we begin to engage those community energies more actively, personally ourselves, we are taking ourselves out of the individuality of being stuck in our cell phones and our computers to the community at large, which then pulls us into the energy of healing the storm itself.
You know what I read this all as is we have to start, or we already are, but a lot of us haven't figured this out yet, that it's really our responsibility.
Exactly right.
To change things. There's no, see, for centuries or for thousands of years, I would gather, we've given away our power.
Yes.
We've given away our power to government, to religion,
to things, to things that we buy. We
buy into.
Yeah, no, I mean just physical stuff that we buy. You know, we are so busy accumulating.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Where the consumerism is so off the charts, and we have this, lovely, media and corporate and government, whatever, that's all gearing us to do exactly that. Oh, we need to, in order to fuel the economy, you have to go and buy things, and in order to have more jobs, you have to go and buy things. Like this mindset that we constantly have to accumulate. But we're doing it mindlessly, and so we end up with all this stuff that we end up either giving away or throwing away into it goes in a landfill. What's the point of that? There has to be some balance in all of this. The storm has come from the fact that energies have built up over time to create what needs to be a rebalancing. It's essentially a pendulum swinging all the way up to one side and then needing to come back to center. And in that swing back to center, there's a lot of tumult. That's a lot of energy moving down into that center, and it's going to move all the way back up to the other side. That's the storm, is that back and forth. When it balances out is when it calms down and it brings itself back into the center. And then you can actually, affect change. So your goal is to not be caught up in that movement. The movement's going to happen anyway because it's the nature of the time energetically. We have driven ourselves to this time by our own complacency. Without realizing it, our lack of involvement in our own community and in our own life has put us in a place where we are now disconnected from our own responsibility. From our responsibility to the planet, to each other, and to our own selves. So we're so disconnected from that. And the way that our body tells us this is through signals of comfort and discomfort. That's your intuition at work. That software will tell you. It will tell you you're unhappy, you're anxious, you're depressed, whatever it is, however it's manifesting in your life, whether you're wealthy or poor, it makes no difference. You are experiencing life on some level that is challenging. The challenge is coming from the fact that you're out of balance. The out of balance is coming from the fact that you've allowed something in your life to go on for a long period of time without being checked. Think of it as stagnant water. That's where all the bad stuff grows.
Right.
As opposed to if the river is flowing, then everything is clean and clear and it's filtering itself along the way. So you're either in the flow of the river and moving with the current, or you're in the stagnant pool, or you're fighting against the current, which is, again, that's just more tumult. Then you're just working harder when all you need to do is let go of the oars and just let the river take you where it's going. Are we actually in flow with nature, with life, with the planet, with the people around us, or are we railing against them? We cannot create if we're constantly railing against. Creation comes out of community. It comes out of agreement. And that's why there's, the war isn't ended on the battlefield. It's ended in the peace talks.
So I would assume we can agree that we need more joy. So the next step would be to move towards that.
Exactly right.
Why can't why weren't we successful in creating more joy? I think part of it is we've kind of been locked into this control, this consumeristic control system where it was really the whole paradigm was survival of the fittest, number one, which kept kind of everybody at odds.
Well, it's
with each other.
the 80s. He who dies with the most toys wins. Well, that's not true. That's a myth that was propagated basically to make a very tiny percentage of the population very rich, and make other people that they could attain something that really they weren't going to be able to attain. That it was an unattainable dream, and we're shown that very clearly by the economic imbalance in this world right now. It's not even just this country; it's the whole planet. Absolutely. The economic imbalance is ridiculous. We need to stop allowing that to happen. And so in order to do that, we need to be engaged in the present moment, look at what's happening, figure out exactly what the software is that created it, and then change that software. We need an upgrade of our software as human beings. And that is all coming from this shift in time.
We know what that software was. Number one, we've been isolated from each other for the most part.
Well, and becoming increasingly more so over time, which
Right.
is now shifting.
Which is now shifting, correct.
And,
The
ironically, it is shifting through the very devices that isolated us to begin with.
social media.
Yeah, because we got too insular in our televisions, and then later our computers, and then later
Right.
our cell phones, and so we have progressively moved towards smaller. And first it was bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it was smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where you wear it on your wrist now.
Right.
And you are engaging your news through that. You're taking your photographs with it. You call a loved one far away. You can video conference with someone on the other side of the world. All of that is happening from this one little unit. And we've become so individualistic that it's now against the law to text and drive because people are constantly on these devices. And yet what's shifted, what's changing now is that just the opposite is happening. We've gone so far into them, they're calling us back out. Social media itself is saying, look at what's happening in the world. While you were away, while you were playing your video game, while you were playing Candy Crush, or you were stuck on, social media and posting videos.
While you were watching television for the last 70 years.
While you were watching the Kardashians, or you were posting a video about a cat, all fine things and whatever, but you were so lost in all of that.
Right.
The world shifted and changed to this dramatic point while you were away. Now that you're back, what do you want to do to change that? And so what's happening is there's this worldwide awakening. We see it in the Women's March. We see it in town hall meetings. We see it in the expansion of this group of people that for a long time sat back. There's that song by John Mayer, Waiting for the World to Change, which came up during the Bush years because his generation was saying, we can't even operate in this right now because there are powers that are in place right now that are keeping us from being able to exercise change. Well, guess what? The world changed. We're here now. The thing that he was singing about, we're in exactly that moment. So if we want to change something, now's the time. You want to do that, then you have to stop letting the storm direct your path.
Or anyone else,
exactly
for that
right.
matter.
You need to.
The power has always been in our hands.
Exactly
create
right.
whatever we want.
Yes.
We've just been too isolated from each other and too ignorant and too lazy. Let's be honest.
Yes.
We are a lazy species. And I think what happened, I don't know how many years ago when we first created government, it was our own creation. Because a bunch of us got together and said, hey, you know what? Let's create somebody that's going to take care of us.
Yes.
So we don't have to. Right? So what we did was we created this body called the government.
See,
and then they came up with their own ideas, right? Because we put them in charge, and they were like, "Hey, we're in charge."
See, I don't see it that way.
No,
because when the founding fathers came over here, they were fleeing a government that was
absolutely
that was essentially an oligarchy. And what they were doing is when they came here, what they were doing is they were trying to set up a system of checks and balances that would prevent that from happening.
Right.
Ironically, it's exactly what happened. We live in essentially an oligarchy. We live in a republic, technically, that we are trying to make a democracy, but at the same time, the vast majority of the wealth is in the hands of 400 people. That is an oligarchy. Everything is being controlled by this tiny, tiny fraction of people.
Agreed.
And by their companies.
Agreed.
And they're trying to take even more control now. So again, while you were away, this is what happened.
While you were asleep.
While you were asleep, while you were busy playing games on your computer, this is what happened. So, and not to say that any of that is a bad thing. It's just that the point of it was that you were being distracted so they could do this. So now people are waking up and going, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't the system I bought into. This isn't what the founding fathers wanted. This flies in the face of it. So
okay, so what do we want? Because you know what? That's rarely even defined out there. People are upset and they're anxious and they're fearful and they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and they're watching all this crap on news and digesting all this media coming at them on the computer and I think you and I summed it up earlier. We want joy. We want more joy.
It has to be.
We want more joy.
But you know what? In order for there to be joy, it can't be joy for a few and sadness for the many.
No.
In order for it to be joy for everyone, then everyone has to have the opportunity. In which case, what we want to do is we want to come together and have a conversation that stops all of this separation. Enough with the bigotry. Enough with the misogyny.
So why don't we do that?
Enough with the homophobia.
You and I are going to start that.
Okay.
We're
Well, that's what we're doing. This is the conversation we've been having for a while.
I almost cursed because I just got excited because you know why?
And it would have been on
because
this
this is the same idea
Yeah.
that's been milling around in my head.
Yes.
Because remember, I had these ideas of getting people together, and we've been doing that. We've been experimenting, right? And we've been having some fun with it,
Right.
and some of it's been a lot of work, but whatever. But this has been my idea as well. So again, we're in sync, as we usually are.
Yeah.
To get together. Maybe invite only at first. Just kind of get the like minds together, like energies, right?
Okay.
And open up a dialogue.
Right.
As far as what we need as a community, as individuals, as families, as even government. Let's bring everybody into the mix and open up a dialogue as far that covers the topic of what can we do now? Right now, what can we start doing right now together and as individually as well? Because we're all autonomous. We're all going to do our own thing.
Okay.
But what can we do to kind of start moving this in the direction that we'd like to see?
The answer is more simple than you think.
It is, and I see it.
It is to operate in the energy of peace and not the energy of war. And
peace, love, joy.
It's the 60s.
Why haven't we been choosing that?
Because we like drama. I mean, look at what we've
I don't like drama anymore.
Look at the society as a whole. Look at the entertainment that they look at.
I see.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all zombie wars and reality TV at the moment.
Right.
You know, and it's something where we're getting so caught up in these stories. We're not seeing them from the perspective of how do we learn from this. We're seeing them from the perspective of how do we ignore what's happening around us because it's so horrible. Let's look at all of this stuff that's either apocalyptic or these people who are treating each other so badly that it's actually entertaining. That's what we've gotten down to. You know what that is? That's the energy of the end of the Roman Empire. That's the fall of the Roman Empire. It's people throwing Christians to the lions for the entertainment of the Romans as they're sitting in the Colosseum.
It's dehumanizing.
It's dehumanizing.
And it's demoralizing.
Exactly right.
And I think
so the question is, when are we going to stop doing that? I mean, the violence that we see on TV, we've gotten so used to the fact that computers can generate this violence so that the actors are safe and we can still see all of this carnage. American Horror Story comes to mind. And, it's not to say that those things don't have value, but they're so extreme at this point. I mean, I remember back in
and
what
so
was it?
plentiful.
Remember back when they were making those snuff films?
Yeah.
And those things were censored and X-rated, and you weren't allowed to watch them in any kind of a mainstream fashion. You can stream stuff like that online. A little kid can be exposed to that kind of thing all the time. At any time. We are sending such a message of violence in this age. Why is that?
The message is violence is okay.
Exactly.
It's entertainment.
Right. No,
it's normal.
It's beyond that. It's desensitizing
It's acceptable. Us. Yes, it is. But let's not focus on that. That's what we're all moving away from.
That
we're
again
starting
goes back
to
to 9/11 and the Iraq War and Abu Ghraib and all of that. That the idea.
Even the first Iraq War. Remember the yellow ribbons? Like it was kind of a message that war is good.
Well, the entire reason for that was
and let's all rally around war.
This was the first time that they had a major war since the Vietnam War, and they wanted to have the propaganda around it such that the country would support it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But anyway, so again. You said the solution is much more simple than we all think.
Okay. So
number one.
What I mean by that is, again, the storm versus the eye. If you're in the storm, you're in the energy of war. You're in the energy of everything being stirred up and thrown around and destroyed. If you're in the eye, you're in the calm. You're in the place where, as things simmer down, that's where the growth is going to happen. And you have the opportunity to prepare for that growth now or not. So while you're in the place that's centered and peaceful, you don't have to remain complacent. You don't have to sit still. You can be creating within the eye. That's where we want to be. We want to be. We the conversations that we have with people that we disagree with politically, we need to have them without yelling at them. We need to stop this nonsense. If somebody posts a Facebook comment and then everybody tears them to shreds, we need to stop this nonsense that because either our religion teaches us or science has proven it in a study that somehow, okay, that's it. We know the truth and you don't. And we become so polarized with each other. We're again in the energy of war.
Again, I don't think we even need to have those conversations. Why not just focus on what's going to make us all happy, and why don't we just start moving towards...
But you're asking what we can do as individuals, and what I'm saying is you take that energy within that peace, within that calm, and then you grow it within the community. That's what's coming. People will either get on board with that or they will not. The people who don't, I think, are going to fall away over time. And we're in a tumultuous time. There's going to be a lot of upheaval before that happens. The question is, where are you going to land when it's all over? Are you going to survive it? And if you do, where are you going to be when it's done? Are you going to be part of the community that's now growing something new, or are you going to be one of the victims of what happened? And that's a choice. As much as it seems like the world just does nasty things to people, that is a choice. So what do you vibrate? Are you magnetically attracting the storm? Are you magnetically attracting peace? Are you putting yourself more in the present moment where you can engage other people around you in a way that is compassionate and helpful and healing? Or are you somebody that's having an argument because you want to be right? Which one of those two things is actually going to affect change? You can be right till the end of time. That isn't going to do a damn thing other than make you feel at that moment like you accomplished something, but you're still going to be angry and you're still going to be upset and you're going to feel like, well, that didn't really do anything for me. I mean, people deal with that in one-on-one relationships all the time. That's why so many marriages break up, is because somebody wanted to be right. It's not necessarily the effective way to communicate.
Absolutely.
What you want to do is you want to find, how do I connect with this other person? And the answer to that is not an argument. The answer to that is the resolution of an argument, or at least coming together on the things that you have commonality with. If you voted for Trump and I didn't, how do we then have a conversation that engages us to where we can do something to better our community? That's the conversation that needs to happen now. And so, music. How do we create music together so that we can uplift the people around us? How do we feed the people that need our help? How do we help get them health care or something? The idea is that as a community, the more that we help the people around us and the more that we help each other, that's what's going to grow. What's existing right now, this tumult that you're seeing, is not going to last. It's going to be big, but it's not going to last. But it came up to see which side you actually fall on. And if the side you fall on is the argument, you're going to lose in the long run, no matter which side you fall on.
Well, because we're still in the conflict paradigm.
Are we? Or are
no,
are
I'm saying they. Conflict is conflict, any way you slice it.
Yes.
Whether it's your own personal conflict that you're having in your mind as you move through your day, or a political conflict that you're having on Facebook or on the phone or in person or anywhere else. There's no real benefit to conflict.
The point of conflict is to pull you out of the present moment. If you are engaged in any kind of conflict, you are justifying your point, which means you're in the past. You're trying to get the other person to agree with you, which is in the future. And you've pulled yourself out of the present moment. Period. If you want to be in the present moment, don't be in conflict. Understand that human being, regardless of who they are, regardless of how they present themselves to you, has something to teach you. Are you learning it, or are you simply trying to beat them over the head with what you feel is the truth? If you're trying to do the latter, you aren't succeeding in anything other than frustrating both of yourselves.
I think, you know what we forget sometimes, that the other person in front of us, the one we're screaming at on the highway because they cut us off.
Yes.
And then sometimes people, I've cut people off inadvertently
we all
because
do it.
I would just, they would, whatever, I was a little bit distracted, whatever.
Right.
But this question has been coming to mind, that or this statement's been coming to mind that this person has a bad day just like I do, and
exactly.
and we'll have a cry in the bathroom in the morning, or at night,
and you don't know their story. It could be
right.
somebody who can barely afford to feed their children and they're just trying to get to work, and we're screaming at them.
Right.
Louis C.K., the comedian, actually has a very funny bit about this, where he says that imagine having that same conversation you're having in your car, where you're screaming and swearing at that other person. Imagine if that same person bumped into you in an elevator. Would you say the same thing? Of course not.
No.
You know, so we have, and again, the car in and of itself is equivalent to the cell phone. We've isolated ourselves. We're in this little literal bubble as we drive down the highway, and we think that it insulates us from having to interact with other people in a meaningful way. And it actually becomes conflict instead of actually all of us getting to where we want to go. You know, allowing the person in front of you to simply get onto the highway because it's a little tight right now. There's a lot of traffic, and they just need you to slow down a little bit. That's what we're moving towards. So are we allowing it or are we not? Abraham Hicks. It's Abraham Hicks. It's the art of allowing. That's the nature of this time. Are we railing against the time or are we moving with it? Are we allowing the time to be? Are we, try and stop nature from having a storm. What are you going to do? Push the rain back up? Are you going to stop the wind with your hand? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you go with it, if you flow with it, or you get into a place where you're safe until it passes, then you can continue.
And flowing with it means change.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Means changing our shortcomings, our childhood issues
that
a lot of us bring into adult life.
Moving out of our stuck places.
And a lot of us are, I would think, feeling stuck or have felt stuck recently. Yes. And staying stuck seems more and more painful these days.
So again, the ocean wave, what does it do? It hits the shore. What does that do? It stirs up all the sand. That stirs up all the little shells. It stirs up all the little crabs and clams and whatever that are there at the shore. And it moves them around. They're just sitting there, probably doing nothing. The clam is growing its shell, and the crab is probably waiting for, plankton or whatever. And, then the wave hits, and boom, oh gosh, I'm over here now. Like this wave has picked me up and it's moved me all the way down the beach. The crab and the clam isn't going, oh my God, I'm going to die. It picks up where the ocean puts it, and it either walks onto the shore or it moves a little bit further out to sea, and it just moves to where it's going. And then it builds whatever it's building from there. We have this illusion that we are going to somehow control the elements.
I think we have an illusion of control, period.
Exactly right.
And it's been the downfall of many a marriage,
yes,
of many a relationship.
It goes back to what I said before about wanting to be right. Wanting to be right is a measure of control. The place to be, if you are in the present moment, then you believe in the wisdom of uncertainty. You do not know what's coming next, and you are open to whatever it is.
Control arrives out of a fear of not having our needs met.
Actually, control arises out of the belief that our needs won't be met.
The belief, or the fear.
The fear. That's exactly right.
Right.
Which again indicates that you're not in the present moment. If you're fearing it, you're anxious about it, you're now worrying, that's putting you in the future. It's what's going to come. How can I manage it now so it doesn't happen then? And you get stuck in this hamster wheel of always being in the future rather than actually creating something in the present moment.
I wrote a publisher letter recently that touched on this subject.
Yeah.
The solution was that 99.9% of the world's problems could be resolved through open and honest communication.
Exactly.
From both sides.
Exactly right.
But we don't engage in it. Because there's always some fear kind of lurking in the background and with one party or the other, or both parties, that we're not going to get what we want, and this person's going to try to screw me, or they're going to try to get what they want, instead of this being a mutually beneficial and harmonious transaction. Mm-hmm. And
the thing that feeds that is the separation. We don't understand that what makes everything else scary is our lack of connection to it. So if you are feeding somebody at a soup kitchen, you're not as afraid of them because you have a one-on-one relationship with them now. You see what their struggle is and you're able to help them. If you're tutoring a child, you're connecting with them on a level where you're seeing the growth, you're seeing their challenge, you're seeing how they're trying to respond to you and they're having difficulty, and you help them along with that. That engages you on a level that pulls you out of the conflict, and it puts you into healing, it puts you into growth, it puts you into how helping another human being helps yourself. That's the energy we want to get to. It's funny because there's just this huge level of anxiety and depression on the planet right now. Bipolar disorder, all these things that are showing us just how out of balance we've become. And that wave is coming from the fact that we feel that we are isolated, and we want to know, how do we control our little corner of the world, when in reality the way to do that is first off let go of the word world control and nurture what you have around you, so that you are comfortable. Create a community where you understand that your neighbor isn't somebody to be afraid of, that there's somebody who can help you in a time of need.
Or how about somebody you could just walk over to, ring the doorbell,
Yeah.
and borrow an onion.
Yeah. Or give them an onion. Or whatever. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is somebody brought this up because she grew up in Europe, and she was telling me about the neighborhood dynamics
exactly
where she lived,
right.
and it's like, I don't understand America, and I was like, well, this is the culture here. This is kind of what we've become, but we are, I believe, quickly pulling out of that.
And the reason that we're pulling out of that is because of how drastic this time has become. The reason this time is so drastic is because of, again, the astronomical clock. We can't not be where we are right now, because the storm was meant to hit now. It was predicted in biblically.
Well, the storm is the motivator.
The storm is the motivator. Exactly right.
Right. Because how do we?
If you're sitting on the park bench and feeding the pigeons, and all of a sudden this huge wind comes along and it knocks you off, you're not going to sit there and try and keep feeding them. The pigeons have long since flown off. You're going to get up and move, and you're going to get to some shelter. So let's do it. But understand that in that shelter, let's do what we can together, so that what we create after the storm has passed is beautiful, rather than trying to fight against it or fight against each other and then thinking somehow something good is going to grow up.
There's nothing to fight against. What are we going to fight against?
And that's what's happening in the world right now. I mean, it's escalating all over the place. The idea that we're just going to escalate conflicts until they go away. What?
That never happened.
What absolute nonsense! They're creating a war machine in order to profit from it. That's the antithesis of what we want.
You touched on something when we were on the AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous topic.
Yes. The HH, yes.
HH. You said Alcoholics Anonymous showed people with that issue, with that particular substance issue, that they are not alone.
Exactly.
So, and we are not alone either.
That's exactly
we're
the reason I made the point.
an entire species that covers this big planet, and yet, for how many decades, it seems like, in many parts of the world, especially in America, we've been so isolated. And looking towards, let's say, maybe a government or a religious group or something to save us, but there's nothing coming to save us.
And what's challenging...
There's nothing coming.
But actually, no, not true. But you know what's coming to save us? Ourselves. And ourselves is not just us individually, it's us and in the community.
Well,
because what you brought up before about the founding fathers, and remember I disagreed with what you said, because the construct that they put in place is that we all decided together.
Right.
And that's what's popping back up now. Is people are saying, no, I'm not taking what you're telling me is going to be, because I don't think what you're doing is going to really help. So I'm going to raise my voice for the first time in my life, and I'm going to say, no, you're not going to do that, because all of us as a community have gotten together and we've decided if you do that, we're voting you out, and the next guy coming in is not going to, he's going to do the opposite of what you just said. People are taking charge of what they actually want. That is coming from that sense of community. It's coming from that sense of not being alone, of understanding there are people who do agree with you, and that you can create from there. And the more agreement, the better. That it's going to come out of co-creating.
I believe that. I was very fortunate to have some very successful male mentors that had come into my life in my, let's say, 20s and 30s, and one of them always stress the fact that everything is contacts. Contacts. And how many working people that have never owned their own business even get that? I mean, it's maybe if you're in sales, you kind of get that. You want to have relationships with certain people in your industry in order to leverage those relationships and to make them mutually beneficial. Or businesses that we run, we've become very, very isolated.
Yes.
And these communities that we used to have, these tribes, let's say, going back centuries, I guess, they would get together. they would have a community meeting. They would have a tribal meeting.
Exactly right.
And they would bring issues up to everyone.
And they were discussed within the group.
They would discuss right within the group,
Yes.
and then there were certain decisions that were made as a group, and I think this was a great model. Because it gave everyone a voice, and everyone was involved. Perhaps our first goal is just to open a dialogue as to how we can support each other in creating and co-creating and working together to create the kind of change we want to see in our communities and in the world.
It's what Gandhi said.
And in our own homes.
It's what Gandhi said. You must be the change you want to see in the world. And there's another quote I would throw in there, and that's what Einstein said, which is, nothing happens until something moves. We are in the movement right now.
That we are.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see everyone at that first community meeting.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess it's time.
Yeah.
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 It is.
Yeah, we need to get together and actually start having a conversation. I'll leave you with this. I had to go sit in court. It was maybe about a year and a half ago, and there was this veteran female judge who was just berating every attorney. They weren't doing things with the way they should have been done, and they'll kind of leave it at that. And a few times she told opposing attorneys to go out in the hall and have an actual conversation and hug it out. She said, hug it out, come to a freaking agreement.
That's wonderful.
Instead of this conflict behind the scenes through emails and faxes and registered letters, and then we have to bring it to Solomon, King Solomon the judge, or some figure of authority to work out, because we're still children who can't even freaking play nice after how many thousands of years that this species has been in existence, right? We don't know how to play nice with each other, and I think that's where we're heading. I think what created all this wants to see us anyway.
Yes,
start playing
exactly
nice.
right. And the way that we begin that is what I'm suggesting for this article, which is that if you want to be in that energy, then you first need to connect outside of yourself. That's where the healing will come from. So it's, yes, we want to
connect with other like-minded individuals.
Not even just like-minded. Connect with other people who aren't like-minded. One of the things that's coming up in the tumultuous time we live in is we're being polar divided. There's this bipolar thing going on right now of Republican versus Democrat, progressive versus libertarian. People who are just vehemently taking their side. The people who voted for Hillary saying Trump is not my president. Yes, he is, because technically he got voted. Whether he should be or not.
Right, technically,
however you
he
want
is.
to talk about by law, he is the president,
right?
And he's your president. If you want to change that, okay, great. But you saying that is then shutting down the dialogue. So it's important that we have those people to point out that that's where we're at. But at the same time, they need to heal from that to the point where what they're doing is productive and not just railing against what is. What Bernie Sanders is doing, taking the conversation to the reasons why we need to be making these changes. That's the dialogue we need.
I believe that we need to work together, and I believe we need to take our power back, and not take our power back from anything specific, because we didn't give it away to anything specific. We just gave it away.
Exactly.
We gave it away, and we've been in this paradigm of, well, I have no say in what happens, and this is the way the world is, and there are forces at work that are very much more powerful. But who's more powerful than the entire human species? Really, the power is in our hands, and it's time to start exercising.
And the way to nurture that is to first awaken it within ourselves, and then extend it to others. And it is in the sharing of what we learn ourselves that will grow. It has to start within our own selves. We have to make the conscious choice that we're going to create a better planet, and then do it. But the only way that that's going to happen is if we first make the choice. This is all about choice. Have we decided to actually do something, or are we sitting in front of the TV, or are we sitting, playing a game on a cell phone? Like,
Right.
what are we choosing? And playing games on cell phones actually has some merit to it. I'm not saying don't do that. A lot of
yeah.
times, some of it's fun, some of it's educational. There are things you can do to like train your brain so that it works better as you get older. Lumosity, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, if that's all you're doing, if you become so insulated that you aren't aware that the world has changed around you to where the world has to kind of smack you awake for that to happen, well, then what do you do once you get the smack? Then you have to sit up and say, okay, I've been here too long. I've been complacent too long, and I have to start to reach out again. And so that's why I said the energy of community is the way to do that. Get involved in something that pulls you out of yourself, and where you personally can engage with another human being in need, and then see what happens.
Sounds like a plan.
Hmm.
So this is Jerry Hochek from Natural Awakenings Magazine in Planet Jersey, and Jefferson Harman from, what's your website again?
Everyday Symbology and StarDreamsCafe.com.
Great. Signing off, and thanks for joining us.